he's been going nuclear and playing insane ball, hitting clutch shots in the playoffs. I've been thinking a lot about Aaron Gordon and the incredibly fascinating development story he has and the prospect that he was. Like, what was he like as a prospect? Since that was kind of before I was watching. And Gordon was always just like one of the most special athletes and always dominated in transition and early offense. Look at how he basically floats in the air. He is an absurd athlete in terms of like not only explosion and quickness off the floor, but like the hang time, basically getting his hand like right at the rim. It's insane stuff. And this made him really deadly in transition. As a ball handler, he wasn't like an amazing creator in the half court, but Gordon, a little hesitation. Like you can see he can't really dribble at this point, and yet he's still able to just get to the front of the rim whenever he wants because he is just that quick and explosive and finish right there. And we're going to talk about prospect Aaron Gordon, what we can learn from him, and just talk about his development to the kind of pro he is today. And I'd really appreciate a like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell. All the support really helps. And a lot of Aaron Gordon's production back in the day, right, was just like offensive rebounds, transition, spot ups, honestly more similar to what it is in Denver now. But I would have loved Aaron Gordon as a prospect, like if he was in this draft. He was just such a freak advantage creator potential guy with his athleticism that I don't know if he ever fully really unlocked, but this stuff is crazy. It's not just the speed and the burst, but it's like the shin angle. Look at how flexible Aaron Gordon, like 6'8", and massive and explosive is. Ability to get low, finish that with the reverse right there. He's one-on-one against Kyle Anderson right here. That's a classic matchup. This is some crazy like 2013 hoops. And this is just like the thing for Aaron Gordon is he had some of the worst touch I have seen as a prospect, and we'll look at the shooting numbers soon, but like easily gets to the front of the rim, explodes by, and you can see his length here. Crazy long arms and the bend as well, basically like a right angle to the basket. Really impressive, but just airballs the finger roll and is lucky his teammate is there to clean it up. And there's so many of these, but when Gordon was attacking downhill and trying to like dunk the ball, he was really phenomenal. As we can see Gordon here, it's not only like the bend, the flexibility, the first step, but look at him hanging in the air, almost brings the ball down to avoid the shot blocker, puts it back up and finishes. Really, really impressive physical talent. And even if like the handle was super basic, you could see the flashes of like, this could be really, really scary. He's just so fluid, and you can see again the shin angle is important to me. The ability to be flexible and generate leverage, like you see it in Shea and Ja and Westbrook, all these guys, right, who are just bendy, explosive, and Gordon had that in spades, obviously with the great length and physicality. He really just made the game look easy. Missed a layup right there. My dominance heuristic I've talked about before, just especially young players who make the game look really easy tend to translate in positive ways, and Gordon was like that. Just looked like he was playing against kids out there at the time, just missing shots, grabbing his own boards. But Gordon's touch like was suspiciously rough in college, and throughout the beginning of his NBA career too, really, where he just missed point blank layups, right, like trying to finger roll that in, didn't seem to make it, didn't use the glass really as much as you'd want. And the spacing for this Arizona offense was absolutely atrocious at times in 2013 or whenever this was, right? You have one big in the paint, two big in the paint, two shooters on this side, nobody to pass to on the weak side, and Gordon just takes a tough hook shot. He wasn't the sharpest decision maker always, right? He was prone to a questionable play or two, but you can see how defenses treated Aaron Gordon, and his shooting numbers were truly 42% from the free throw line is quite something. 25% on like a high volume of non-rim two-pointers. Was efficient on like crazy low volume three, and he's like a historically poor shooting prospect. These are free throw below 60. Remember, he was at 45. And then over 100 non-rim twos attempted, right? So they weren't just dunking everything and trying to dunk everything. This is not a lot of shooters. Not a lot of shooters have come out of this group. Like, TJ Warren is always the one weird outlier, and he improved throughout his college career, but there's basically no actual shooters here. And when you actually sort by far two percentage, out of about 500 names, Aaron Gordon was fourth to last. Really, really historically, weird shooting projection. And yeah, teams would back off of him from the mid-range, give him wide open free throw line jumpers. And part of that was just because he was so damn athletic that it was not a great idea, but his shot selection wasn't great. He'd be kind of wild and out of control. And Gordon's handle was not advanced, as is the case for many, super hyper athlete 18-year-old wings, where Gordon gets ripped pretty easily, right? Just not generally in great control of the ball, and wasn't always the best in terms of his driving decisions and cadence or anything. Just like back into post-ups and take these tough shots, right? When he has advantages, right? He used the screen. He's got space, obviously, to potentially explode downhill, make a pass. But, yeah, I mean, look, this is solid footwork, right? He gets into position, but Gordon just did not have the touch to convert these kind of difficult shots. And, there were some mid-range flashes. Like, he did make some of them, right? That 25% from on non-rim twos has to come from somewhere. And, occasional flashes, and Gordon hit the occasional corner three, but his role in Orlando was fascinating, which we'll get to in a second. But Gordon was also a pretty impressive, just like, decision maker and like flow of offense player, which I think is like an underrated thing that I've talked about, where he wasn't like a crazy passer, but he had a positive assist to turnover ratio. Like, again, couldn't really dribble or keep his handle, but he would often like pick the ball up, find a teammate, set a screen, right? Instead of just hucking up a bad shot or anything, ends up finishing. Hell of a pass by TJ McConnell, by the way, my GOAT. But he was a really smart passer, like a good connective passer, where Gordon would just like catch the ball in space. This helped defenders stepping up, and then he can just pass down to 23 right there for the wide open dunk. And Gordon was really good at these like connective passes, and he had some pretty high level flashes, right? Spinning away from this digging post defender and then dropping it down into, oh my God, I think that was Brandon Ashley who dunked that ball. Pretty ridiculous, but another good laydown here. You can see the number 3 here just kind of ball watches TJ McConnell. Shout out to him. Slips behind Gordon with a nice little laydown for an easy layup. So he really had that. But he was totally thrust into like an on-ball creator role for a pretty piss-poor Magic team, right, throughout the beginning of his career. This is like from one of his last years in Orlando, where like his main play types were pick and rolls and isolations and face-ups and post-ups. And he became a pretty solid driver. Like, Gordon could get downhill. You see him using some like varied pace and a nice pickup with his footwork there. Finishes by Serge Ibaka, but for the most part, still just a guy who tried to use his athleticism to overwhelm defenders. And it worked a lot of the times, right? Gordon's so quick. You can see the bend still there. And of course, he added a ton of strength in the league. And, obviously now, this was like 2018 or something. 7 years later, he's a monster in Denver, which we'll talk about, but not always like the best decision maker. He was definitely miscast as a primary guy in Orlando, and you can see his efficiency kind of suffered for that, where, yeah, I mean, only one season above league average true shooting in his Orlando career. That was 2016, right? Obviously, he's been crazy efficient in Denver, but we see the shooting, like, this year it's been so good. And he's always been a good playoff shooter, which we'll get to. But really poor shooting numbers, really poor mid-range numbers, and just, like, fairly high usage without much efficiency. As always, shout out to dunks and threes. But, yeah, like, 23 usage, that's, like, pretty significant for a guy who did none of that in college. And he, handled it pretty well. But I think it was clear that this was, like, not his best role, right? Where Gordon, I guess, in a pinch, like, good job using jail here, but his handle gets poked because he wasn't, he still isn't an excellent ball handler. He's never become a great ball handling creator. That's just never his game, and now doesn't need to. But he developed a little bit of like a mid-range post game where he'd use his athleticism and size to elevate. But again, a lot of isolations, like stand still, face up, drives, jab step, get to the middle of the floor, and hit a tough contested fadeaway. Like, this was Aaron Gordon's game in Orlando, but his shooting was definitely a problem. Like, defenses, especially against switches, like with weaker defenders like Sabonis, could just kind of play off of him and bait the jumpers because Gordon would take them, and he just wasn't super efficient. But he definitely did kind of improve. But it's crazy to see what he is in Denver now, right? Just this awesome corner shooter who's quick and effective, getting his shots off, right? Firing, like, he's been really efficient in this series as a complimentary playmaker from where he was just a little bit in Orlando. And he was a solid passer with the Magic too. His assist numbers were pretty low, just because I don't think he was like a great on-ball, live dribble, on-the-move passer. But you could see in these like advantage situations, right? He can find Vucevic, maybe a little bit low, and I don't love that delivery. Was Drummond's
He probably could have just bounced that in right there. But anyways, got the ball there. We see much more of this stuff in Denver, playing with a great team, obviously playing with Nikola Jokic, hitting clutch game-winning threes. He's sped up his jumper by quite a bit since college and since Orlando, and is obviously much more comfortable. But Gordon has developed into like a perfect third starter, right? You know, like he is probably the third best guy on this Denver team, right next to Jokic and Jamal Murray, just by doing stuff like this, being a great roller, sets hard screens, two defenders go to Jokic because he's such a damn threat, and Gordon's able to finish strong with the and one. And what separates him from other, like, you know, defensive wings to me is his strength and his power. Like he's become so gigantic and muscular and strong that it's hard to hide. You know, usually you can hide, you know, your worst defenders like Norman Powell on weaker shooters. Gordon really isn't a weaker shooter anymore, but point being, like, he can punish these players in the post and score this way because he's been doing this since like college, right? Since his Arizona days, even though it's just the usage and the frequency throughout his career has been very up and down. But, you know, instead of getting an isolated, stagnant post up in Tucson or like a face up in Orlando, he's sealing an early offense against Kawhi fucking Leonard of all people, wrestling with him and getting the ball from Jokic for an easy finish. And honestly, maybe could have been an and one. Like, his strength and power at this stage of his career are absolutely phenomenal. And Gordon's like a great cutter and a great offensive rebounder. His tip stuff is so good. I mean, he was an elite offensive rebounder in college, always kind of had that. I love this real like subtle play where Gordon spins off Jalen Williams, like a slow spin, lulls him to sleep and snags that offensive rebound. Like, such a cool play. He's been devastating on the glass to this Thunder team that just had the most disastrous performance ever in the game that I just watched. And just really smart cuts. Gordon doesn't get the ball here cutting to the rim, but because J-Dub is playing gap, has his head turned face Jokic, he's in perfect position to just tap the ball in softly when Jokic ends up missing that shot. So he adds a ton of value without the ball, and like, he's never going to be a great handler. Great defenders, like long players like J-Dub, can still get into his handle, rip the ball out, and right, that's not his role on the Nuggets. He's never asked to be their primary, even like secondary creator. He can do some like I said, switch and mismatch hunting, but you know, he's not a creator, and he's not someone who's really effective with the ball in his hands and having high usage and creating that into efficient offense. But of course, he doesn't have to on this Thunder team, right? Because he is the perfect third, fourth option on offense next to a generational offensive talent like Jokic. And like, we see this little middle fadeaway, right? Like, he did the same thing in Orlando, but instead of a post up, it's a really sharp cut to the middle in front of Hartenstein, who was trying to steal that ball. And then Gordon ends up hitting the little mid-range jumper. Everyone knows about Aaron Gordon defensively. This was an offense video. I think his offensive, you know, development is much more interesting to talk about too, because he was always a freak defender with his athleticism and length, and he wasn't perfect as a prospect, right? He had some discipline issues and just focus off the ball, but you can see the potential always. And Gordon obviously was great on Kawhi, adds value as a weak side shot blocker, incredibly versatile player, and obviously a great rebounder as well, which boosts value and helps your team get out in transition. But like, the defensive moments, as you might expect, were crazy in college. And this is a good, just like one possession example of Aaron Gordon and just how good of like a play-by-play defender he was, doing stuff that wasn't always even box score stuff. Crazy on-ball defense potential. And obviously he's become an amazing on-ball defender, but his footwork was like all over the place. It was a mess, but even still, like, he was sliding here. Most players in this position are cooked, but Aaron Gordon finally like flips his hips somehow. It is insane. Again, we're talking about just this special fluidity and just flexibility and easiness to the way he moves while being an incredibly explosive athlete. Like, it's a rare trait, and I don't really think there are any like comparable athletes in this draft, thinking about it. Like, Cooper is the closest one, but like, I don't even think he's the level of explosive or smooth that maybe explosive, but definitely not as smooth as Aaron Gordon was. Look how quickly he gets off the floor here to block this shot. Like, I don't know, like, Thiero kind of has the twitchiness, but he's a little stiffer. Like, Queen has similar profiling. But, yeah, I mean, Gordon is like a one-of-one athlete. He's overwhelmed former pros and college players. Once again, we talk about the dominance heuristic, right? Just making this look easy, making it look overwhelming, impossible to miss. And, yeah, like, blowing up an inbounds lob back screen all by himself. Like, crazy ability to track the ball back and use the crazy wingspan right there. But Gordon was so fun to track throughout his career, right? And it's a good reminder, right? Just like bet on these super young nuclear athletes. And this is like the ones that are actually special. Like, I think Gordon is on a different tier of athlete than like an Aaron, like an Andrew Wiggins or a Josh Jackson, or even like a Cooper Flag, I think, which is high praise for Gordon, right? And especially ones with pretty solid feel for passing and decision making and cutting off the catch like Gordon did. But he's become one of the coolest NBA players to watch in a perfect role for him. And I hope you enjoyed this little scouting throwback type video. I've been meaning to do more of these, so if you have suggestions or ideas for these, feel free to leave them. But thank you all so much for watching.